Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jana Habian. I'm the project officer at the Interreg Alpine Space, and today with my two colleagues, Elisa Kirschbaumer and Nuno Madeira, we'll be starting our first Q&A session of the year and of this first call. We prepared some rounds of Q&A session for today. You will see in the next slide how we will proceed for this 1 hour 30 that we have. So as you can see on the next slide, we will start with the first round with some general framework of the new program and first call. My colleague Nuno will present briefly an introduction, and after we will follow the live question from your side. The second round will be how to start developing your application and how to create a partnership. And the third round will be about what is good work plan and how to measure your success. Let me just underline that we will accept questions that comes from Slido. Therefore, you can use Slido for questions that comes to your mind. And we will start with our introduction question, and I give the floor to my colleague Elisa.
Hello, also from my side, good afternoon and welcome to this session. As just said by Jana, we will use Slido to get in touch with you. Make use of that, please, because I mean it's supposed to be a Q&A session, so we need your questions, and we are here to answer to them. And as you can see, it's displayed now on the screen. You see the website where you have to log in and the hashtag to join this session and to pose your questions. I already see that a couple arrived just now. You don't see the questions that have been submitted by you in the past days because we are already answering to them during these brief presentations. So now you will basically see what is starting to arriving now from you and not the old ones. Just to make sure that all of you are actually on Slido and get on Slido in time, we have now 3 very brief questions that I ask you to kindly join basically me to answer them. And I will now launch the first one, and I hope that you all can see it and invite you to submit your answers so we can be sure that most of you are on Slido and that you are actually following us and ready then to also pose your questions. I won't leave them open too long because, as you see, they're very basic question, and it's really just a way to break a bit the ice and welcoming you on the Slido platform. So I see some people are arriving. Maybe some are coming a bit later, which would be fair enough. So let's wait just moment still. I see that many of you got to know about the event. Well, it's quite evenly, apart from LinkedIn. I see that website, newsletter, other colleagues. So it's pretty wide where the information came from to you. Okay, and I see that people are joining slowly, but growing in numbers. I will now close this poll because I see that more or less numbers are growing in the same way. And we will now go to a second question, which is actually a bit more specific, just to see who of you actually has already been, as single person or as organization, part of an Alpine Space project in the past, or maybe is involved in one which is still running at the time, one of the last the last call. So it's also a good way to see a bit like how experienced you are in this sense or not. And at the moment I see that it's more or less half and half. Even more who never been a beneficiary. No, now it's raising. Okay, but it's good to see that you're voting half and half now. Okay, so I will close also this one. I would say that it's quite clear here as well, the overview. And last questions, which we have, it's if you already have a project idea, and if so, if you're planning to submit it already now within the first call for proposal, which is open in these days, as you know. Because of course, like I expected, most people are already planning to do something, but of course, like we are here also to open to answer to any kind of question, which can be useful also if you are just starting to plan to submit something, but are still not really ready to go for the first call. And I see that it was almost half and half, and now the no is decreasing quickly. Okay, so let's say that I would also close this one, and I would say that then it's keeping changes. But it seems that it's higher the number of people who are actually planning to submit something now with the first call. Okay, so that's it. It was just really a way to break a bit the ice. I see that you are there and you're participating, so this is good. And as I said, just keep posting your question also while Jana and Nuno will be briefly presenting this topic that Jana mentioned before. And at the end of each small presentation, we will go through to your questions and answer the most of them. And hopefully we'll be able to make everybody happy. So I give now back the word to Nuno, which will start with the first topic. And then, as I said, we will see again here on Slido for your questions.
Thank you, Jana. Yes, indeed. In this first question, in the first Q&A session, you will get the chance to learn a little bit more about the application process and, as already mentioned, ask questions about it so that at the end of the day, you feel confident with the proposal you will submit to the program. I will briefly introduce the program priorities and the type of projects that you will submit in the first call, but also shed some lights on the intervention logic from the work plan to the selection of output and result indicators to capture the success of your project. Throughout the presentation, I will make reference to a number of key documents, which I imagine you are already familiar with, namely the Interreg program, which provides a solid understanding of the challenges and needs for the 21-27 period, but also the actions and the target groups per specific objective. On top of this, you also need to be familiar with the program manual and its annexes, which offer valuable information and guidance on the rules and procedures in place. And finally, the terms of reference, of course, which sets up the legal framework of the first call for project proposals. So if you could push on to the second slide, please. So in this slide, you see how the program is structured around priorities and specific objectives. So as you can see on your screen, the program is structured around 4 program priorities and 7 specific objectives, whose purpose is to help ease the transition to carbon neutrality and climate resilience. These priorities and objectives offer great scope to exploit untapped potentials in the program area, from climate change adaptation to circular economy and digitalization. And on top of this, one should also keep in mind that the program is fully committed with the European Union macro-regional strategy for the Alpine region, which has been in place already for a number of years. The first call for project proposals is open to all specific objectives under priority 1, 2, and 3, and marks the beginning of a new approach to cooperation through small-scale projects, which constitute, on top of the classic projects, the basis for co-financing activities. Push on, please. So now in the next slides, I will give you some or share with you some of the main features of both classic and small-scale projects. Well, classic projects have been in place already for a number of years and offer a results-oriented approach to cooperation. These projects are appropriate to tackle a wide range of challenges and may address one or more cycles of the policy cycle, from strategic policy implementation to piloting activities, and of course the policy implementation. On the screen, you can see some of the key cornerstones of 4 classic projects in terms of partnership, duration, and total budgets, which can also be found in the terms of reference. Second, next slide, please. Now, with regard with small-scale projects, and this is the new typology of cooperation that we introduced in the 21-27 period. The purpose of small-scale projects and the reason why we want to offer this possibility to all potential applicants is twofold. Well, the first one is to reach out newcomers who are eager to take part in the program. The second one, which is equally important, is to make greater use of synergies and complementarities between projects. In order to do so, the small-scale projects must either develop set-the-scene projects that could open up new perspectives to cooperation through a classic project, which could be financed by the Alpine Space program or any other funding source that you may consider appropriate, or to conduct capitalization activities to roll out available tools, solutions, and encourage the uptake among target groups for greater impacts in the territory. Again, you have a number, you see the same cornerstones in terms of partnership, in terms of duration, which is shorter compared to classic projects, and so it is the budgets. Thank you. Now we open the floor to questions that you may have in relation to this first presentation.
Yes, indeed. So now you should see the screen that I'm sharing, and we actually do have already quite some questions. I would maybe start with the one more related to what we were discussing now. So basically to the general framework of the program. And we have one, for example, which is asking what kind of investments are allowed in the program, building e-vehicles, softwares. So maybe that's a good hint to explain maybe a bit better what is actually funding and what not the program.
Right. So if we start off with this question, which is definitely interesting. Well, I mean, the program, ETC programs, or in particular this one, I wouldn't say it's appropriate for that kind of investments on vehicles. And what was the other option? I don't see it on my screen anymore. But well, I mean, this sort of investment.
It was mentioning e-vehicles and softwares as well.
And software, right. Yep. So it's not really the type of investment that we expect from applicants. We want to, I mean, as you can see from the program priorities, the 21-27 period is very much focused to on how to tackle carbon neutrality or how to address climate resilience. So here we do expect that projects bring new solutions to the territory, which can be strategies, for instance, that you can apply at different territorial levels. On top of this, you can also you can also deliver pilots that will tell you a little bit more about how your methodology behaves on the ground and how this can be useful or can be translated into a policy document that hopefully you will make policymakers aware of. So this is the sort of investments that we expect from our applicants, not necessarily software or e-vehicles. Next question.
Thank you, Nuno. Yes, we have actually another one, quite generic, which is maybe related to the fact that now we have a bigger cooperation area, because someone is asking, does my project have to have a link with the mountainous part of the cooperation area?
Well, I mean, you certainly have to demonstrate that you have the expertise, that you can bring the expertise and knowledge required to conduct the project activities, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you require a link to mountain areas. I mean, it pretty much depends on the topic, but our geographical context is very specific compared to other transnational programs. I think that mountain areas is the main sort of say geographical. It's what stands out in our transnational program. But of course, you cannot forget that this program also has a main importance when it comes to functional areas and how these behave vis-a-vis the mountain areas. So I wouldn't say that you necessarily require a link with mountain areas, but again, it pretty much depends on the topic that you want to address. So maybe here, if you could be more specific, that would be very helpful.
Yes, then we check if something more specific will arrive in questions. Going a little bit more like deeper in how a project and it's built, but still quite generic as a question, I would pose this one. What is the exact role of the observer? To what extent do they need? Should they be involved? Can they act as funders?
Well, observers are extremely helpful because they can steer your activities. They can provide input while you develop your activities. So if you need to do some fine-tuning, I think that having a number of observers in your project can be extremely helpful in that regard. Not only during the implementation of your activities, but also to sort of say validate the outputs that you want to make available to your target groups. So so in that sense, I would say that they play an important role during the project implementation. I would just advise you to choose them carefully and ensure that they are committed to provide inputs and to share their expertise during the project implementation. Otherwise, of course, it wouldn't make much sense to bring them on board.
Thank you, Nuno. I would just maybe now go to one question, which is the opportunity to maybe specify something more regarding small-scale projects. Someone is asking, is there a requirement on the composition of partnership? Do we have to find a balance of representation of type of partners?
Well, as I mentioned during the presentation, you have a number of cornerstones that you have to keep in mind while setting up your partnership. And exactly because we want to ensure the transnationality of your project, it wouldn't make sense if you submit a proposal whose partnership is composed by partners from two partner countries. This wouldn't, let's sort of say that the transnationality of your project wouldn't emerge clearly with this partnership. So in that regard, I think that's, you know, as we are a transnational program, we have to demonstrate the transnational character of our projects. And in that sense, it is important for us to ensure that we bring a diverse group of partners, not only in terms of geography, but also in terms of sectors. Although in the case of small-scale projects, it might not be required, depending again on the type of project you want to conduct. But as it is a shorter type of, or actually the duration of the project shorter, and the activities that you want to conduct are very focused, it might not be necessary to bring on board a diverse group of people covering different sectors. But again, it depends on the topic you want to address. But I would, as a recommendation, I would definitely keep in mind the cornerstones and the transnationality character of your project.
And on this, Nuno, I would maybe also then take a second question, always regarding small scale, which is 3 partner is really enough? Is there a penalization if partners are not new? Can we involve new type of partners as pilot areas?
Of course. I mean, as long as you meet the minimum required, your proposal, we cannot reject your proposal in terms of eligibility, exactly because you meet the minimum required. Then is it enough to have 3 or to bring 4 or 5? That pretty much depends on the number of activities that you want to conduct within your small scale project and how these activities will get to the results or to the change you want to achieve. So so the partnership has to be put into perspective in relation to your work plan and of course to the budgets that you will propose, among other aspects that you will be confronted with while preparing your application.
Thank you, Nuno. I'm just scrolling through the questions, and maybe we take still 2. Just I'm trying to follow a bit the discussion, not to just jump from one topic to another. But I have to follow your question. So still, like, I'll do my best, and then the other ones we will maybe take later. So there was one which was related again to observers, since we mentioned them. So I take it on, which is, do observers need to be already named in the submitted project, or can they be added later on?
Well, you can, of course, name your observers, but in case you are invited to submit a full application, then you can add more observers in case you feel they are relevant to your activities. It could be also the case that you want to bring observers during the project implementation. This can also be, this is also acceptable, but you don't have to identify all observers that you would like to bring. Well, of course, it will be very helpful to have already the commitment of all observers that you would like to bring on board during the project implementation. But of course, you have to tell us, what kind of observers you would like to see on board, and demonstrate that you've done enough effort to make sure that you will have them on board. And this, of course, you can already identify a number of observers that are committed and engaged to take part in the program in that role.
Exactly. And we have then here a question regarding specific objectives, which is, can we address more specific objectives at the same time in a project? Namely, some issues cannot be solved for one sole aspect, but need a multi-sectoral integrated approach.
I would, well, it's an interesting question. Indeed, many topics will be cross-cutting in the sense that you can address digitalization through circular economy or vice versa. But at the end of the day, you would still be required to select one priority and one specific objective. So in the sense that, and I will later explain this in another intervention about the work plan, but you have to keep in mind that your project needs to be aligned with one of the program priorities. And of course, one of the specific objectives within the priority you will select for your project.
Exactly. And since we have still a couple of minutes, if we can keep it super short, I would maybe give you this question because maybe it wasn't still clear your answer before, it might be. So regarding the mountain reference, are projects possible whose activities take place predominantly at the periphery of the program area?
You mean outside the program area? If it's outside the program area, then we need to assess what would be the added value for the program area. For taking consideration that's the main, features. That's the main features that basically characterize our program. Of course, in terms of mountainous, but also in terms of and the implications this has in terms of access to services or other topics that are covered in the program priorities in terms of biodiversity and those that I already mentioned. The fact that the territory is extremely sensitive to climate change, and of course the impacts are huge in case we don't meet our carbon neutrality. So to sum up, if your idea is to conduct activities outside of the program area, I think that you will not be addressing the program expectations, I fear.
Thank you, Nuno, also for this last answer. Since it's 2:30, I will maybe just now give the word to Jana, and all the questions that we have now on the screen, of course, we will keep answering right after her brief presentation. So Jana, it's you.
Thank you, Elisa. Now we go to the second round of questions and answers. And we will start with the topic that is actually very important when preparing your application and proposal. And we noticed that you have also a lot of questions related. So how to start developing your application? First, you have to know what is the relevance of your proposal. Therefore, we suggest that it's very important that you start with a challenge. So first, you have to analyze the situation and define which is the challenge that your project aims to tackle. And how would you like to improve the situation with your project? So with a concrete examples, with the concrete facts. Then the second and very important point is the transnationality. So the Interreg program is all about transnationality. Therefore, you have to know why do you need to cooperate with to address this challenge. You have to some kind of justify why is your project relevant for the Alpine Space and all the actors involved. Therefore, you have to define at the very beginning who are your target groups. So the target groups are entities that are affected by the challenge and have the competence or mandate to influence them. So therefore, the target groups have to be very concrete stakeholders and very concrete groups that you would like to address the challenge. Therefore, the next one is the objectives. At the beginning, since the beginning, you have to know what the objectives should be in line with the needs of the target groups and contribute to tackling the identified challenge. So basically, the objectives must be very clear, and this is what an evaluator will be very much look at. And another point, and last but not least of this, so don't take it as a last, is the contribution to a wider strategy and policies. Therefore, you have to take it broader. So what is your project or proposal mean for the European initiative, for the European strategy for the Alpine region? What is your proposal? What is the challenge and contribution for the European Green Deal? For the European territorial agenda. So therefore, you have to think broader. You have to think in a kind of bigger way. Therefore, the next point that it's related, it's how to create the partnership. So how to start with your partnership in your proposal. So the basic composition that you have to know and divide is that the partnerships it's created by project partners, and one of the project partner is a lead partner, which is the main contact also for the further work with the JS and for representation of your project. Both of them, so project partners and lead partners, are beneficiaries. Therefore, they get the ERDF contribution. While in your proposal and your application, you can also add observers. The observers are not beneficiaries, therefore they don't get the ERDF funds. But the project partners may involve observers in the implementation of the project. And these observers may provide valuable expertise and support to the project and may play different roles, such as multipliers, financiers, and bringing in national co-financing. They can be policymakers or local implementers. Therefore, it's up to you. They're also not part of the application form. Therefore, it's really up of the applicants to see. But of course, it really depends of your expectations. So as was already discussed in the previous by my colleague Nuno, what is the program area and from which countries or areas my partner should come from. So therefore, as it's already stated in the program area is composed by member states. As you can see on the map, they are European member states and 2 non-European member states. As you can see, Germany, France, and Italy are not whole, but it doesn't mean that partners doesn't need to come from other regions. As already Nuno mentioned before, it has to be really specify what is the added value if a partner comes from an area which is not in the program area. During the weeks, we also got different questions already from you regarding the partnership and who to take on board. That you ask also in the questions like, for example, how many partners, which partners are good to have on board in my proposal. Therefore, the formula is very different. I would say there is not a real good answer on that question. What you have to then keep in mind is that the competence is very important and the capacity for implementation it's very important when you choose your partners. There should be also clear roles, the division of the roles inside the project and the involvement of each of them. You can of course choose public bodies and bodies governed by public law or private organizations. So it's really a combination of everything. What you have to keep in mind that natural persons are not foreseen to act as project partners in this program. To the JS, we got also some questions already from your side, where to find a specific partner from specific member state. For example, you're based in France and you would like to involve partners from Austria and Germany. Have to be underlined that we don't have our network is not so much developed, and that's why the first contact that you should address is the Alpine Space contact points in each partner state, and you can find the contact on our website under the contacts, and there you can see you can address any question you have related to partnership to your contact point, where you can ask a question in your language. And contact points can also get in touch with other contact points. But for example, there could be already some demand for any partner search, therefore maybe they can keep you in touch with other partner search for similar application. And I believe, Elisa, this is it. And do we have any question related?
Yes, we do. Actually, some of them came already like during Nuno's presentation. So I'm trying now to group them a bit, but like surely regarding partnership, we have two very practical one. The first one, it's is it possible to add partners between step 1 and step 2?
Yes, this is possible.
And then we have a second one, also practical. Is it possible to change the lead partner between step 1 and step 2?
Let's say that you have to be cautious who to change and why, what is the reason, because basically the evaluation of the partnership is one of the basic steps in the evaluation process. So you have to be cautious about this step.
Thank you. And I'm just scrolling through to see if there is anything else that we can like still assess now related to partners. There was actually one question, is there a platform to find partners in other countries? You partially already replied by mentioning the national contact points. And one question, I guess, was from someone that it's not, it's for the first time involved in Alpine Space program, because they were asking if they should always choose a lead partner. And Jana replied during the presentation, and I also replied to this person directly. So I hope that that point is clear. But if there are any questions, of course, you can just edit and we can explain something further if needed. And something maybe again about partnership, it's we have a question here. Do a small scale project have together a diversity of partners, university, public institution, NGO, private sectors?
Yes, of course, it's the same. It's for the classic and small scale project. So you have in the small scale, you have from 3 to 6 partners, and of course the diversity is the same requested. So the diversity I also didn't mention, or I think Nuno already mentioned, for the small scale project, the partner should come at least from 3 different countries in the program area. And of course, it can be public authorities, can be university, it can be private. So yes, the quality of the partners, their background, their qualification, if they already were involved in other similar projects, Interreg project, or so direct, indirect funding or direct funding related to the topic. Of course, everything it will be assessed, we'll say, the background of partners.
Thanks, Jana. I would maybe now take one step back. So talking again about observers, someone is asking, will the role of the observer be assessed by the JS?
No. So basically the JS will assess the composition of the partnership as beneficiaries. Regarding the observers, which are not beneficiaries, it's not a critical part, to say. So it's not obligatory to have observers as a request. So therefore, there's no minuses related.
Thank you. Now we have like a series of questions which are a bit like disconnected between each other. So maybe I would just take another one, which is also of generic interest, which is, are there any national requirements to be met by the express of interest submission? Where can we find such requirements?
Indeed, maybe I didn't mention. So you can see also, maybe already you saw at the in the submission in the template of the submission of the proposal, there is also an option for the checklist. On that checklist, you can also check exactly what is required, so you're sure you fill in all required requirements. And you could see also there is a general recommendation of the program to contact the ACP of the lead applicant before submission of was considered. So therefore, applicants that wish to apply are very much invited to contact their national contact points before apply, in order to see if they also require any national requirements, if they need any national requirements related. That's why it's also one part of the checklist. So this is something that it's quite useful to do, and we very much recommend it.
Thanks, Jana. One other question which might be of importance, especially for those that are less experienced, is there a maximum number of projects to which my institution can participate?
Well, it's not really defined the maximum number, but you have to think about, do you have enough capacity? Do you have enough people to work on several projects? Is going to be the quality of your work will be the same, or is better that you focus only on one, maybe two projects? So there is no such limitation, of course, but each organization needs to know what are the really what they are capable of if they get more projects to work on.
Exactly. And since we have not so much time now until the next presentation, I would just maybe take two very practical questions which are quite similar and or actually can go together, which is, what is a minimum and maximum number of work packages? Is there any limitation? And the one after, is it possible to dedicate one work package to communication?
Well, I think this will be something that Nuno will talk about later in more in detail. So I think I will leave this for later on. You want to start already his topic, or he can comment it now?
As you prefer.
Right. I think I can answer the question while I present the second part of my interventions, which, I mean, these two questions already anticipate a little bit what I will talk about next. So indeed, I could answer these questions.
Okay. I can leave the floor to you, Nuno, and you just start with your next presentation then.
Well, perfect. Sounds good to me. So in my now in my second intervention, I will talk a little bit more about the work plan and how to capture or how to measure the success of your project. And of course, I will try to answer those two questions that were that you mentioned, Elisa. Next slide, please. Right. So what you see in this slide is a very simplified way of what we understand as the intervention logic. So the diagram that you see here depicts the relationship between projects and program activities that leads to the territorial change. So the principle behind the intervention logic is that projects should lead to a territorial change. This means that projects are required to demonstrate the context in which the debate should be set, including the underlying causes that influence it. So on this basis, the change that the project wants to achieve will emerge more clearly. In order to do so, projects must define specific objectives and results that are needed to achieve the change. These specific objectives and results needs to be defined in relation to the program priorities and specific objectives. They are so also contributing to the achievement of the program specific objectives and results. Next slide, please. Right. So now when we look at the work plan more in detail, I mean, now that you have an understanding that your activities, that your specific objectives have to be linked with the program specific objectives. And now I will shed a little bit of light on the work plan for both classic and small scale projects. For classic projects, on top of management and communication, I would say that your classic projects need to be structured around 3 work packages. Each work package is composed of a group of activities which are related in nature or team and explain the process or the processes that needs to be implemented in order to achieve the outputs. That, of course, needs to be realistic and tangible. Besides, applicants should consider that project objectives, results and outputs have to be logically linked to the work plan. So in other words, the work plan has to clearly show how the objectives will be reached and results achieved. As I said already, outputs needs to be tangible and realistic to reach your intended results. Besides, they have to incorporate the transnational value. What does it mean? It means that they have to demonstrate the practical use by your project target groups. Or these outputs have to demonstrate that the solutions that you offer can be transferable to other locations. And a third equally important aspect is the durability of the outputs, which will basically explain the success of their use by the target groups. Next slide, please. In relation to the work plan for small scale projects, well, in this case, it's very much simplified. Well, simply because you just have one work package and you just need to select, of course, one work package that will be organized around one specific objective. But then again, this work package needs to bring together a number of activities related in nature or team that will help you implement or achieve the outputs that you want to deliver. Here we do expect that at least one output is delivered by small-scale projects. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Right. And with this slide, I finish my intervention. And here I will tell you a little bit how to capture the success of your story. Well, for each output, you will have to select an output and a results indicator. The program, as you can see on the screen, the program has selected a number of output and result indicators. These output indicators, which are basically pilot actions, and solutions should be seen as products delivered by projects to support beneficiaries to reach the territorial change that I explained in the previous slide, while result indicators measure the direct effects of the project outputs, again for beneficiaries or users, meaning the target groups. The result indicators are solutions taken up or upscaled by organizations, and the second result indicator is organizations with increased institutional capacity due to their participation in cooperation activities across borders. This result indicator has been developed by the Alpine Space program in cooperation with other transnational programs and the Interreg program, and is specifically and whose purpose is to capture the success of the outputs delivered in priority 4. Now, you have to consider that projects have to follow a logical correspondence between output and result indicators. What does it mean? It means that if you implement a pilot activity or a joint solution, the results will have to be necessarily a solution taken up or upscaled by organizations. And this is the case from priority 1 to priority 4, with the exception of the outputs on the pilot actions. In the case of priority 4 is a little bit more specific, and here we believe that, and that's the reason why we decided to have organizations cooperating for the multi-level of macro-regional strategies to capture to measure the success of your project. And again, the logical correspondence with the result indicator would be the PSR1, which we describe as being the number of organizations with increased institutional capacity. This is not so much important at the moment because the first call, as I said at the beginning, only covers priority 1, 2, and 3. But this way you have a clear understanding of the indicators of both output and result indicators that the program has selected for the 21-27 period. And now, if you have questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Yes, we do have some other questions that arrived, and while I'm sharing the screen, I answer to one of them myself, which is someone was asking if we will share the slides, and I said, of course, yes, and we are also recording the event, so like all information will still be available. And again, I invite you to make use of this still half an hour we have ahead and really ask any question you might still have or that came while talking now. So we have, let's go here. So one question regarding policy recommendations. Should they be considered as a solution within the output indicators or anywhere else?
Policy, indeed, policy recommendations can be seen as a solution by the program, and therefore the output indicator would be the one I mentioned, the 116 jointly developed solutions. What I can also say is that if you feel that your output is not, you don't find a logical correspondence in none of the output or result indicators, this is not a problem, because we have a number of actions per specific objective that are not covered by the outputs and result indicators mentioned in the previous slide. And here I'm talking about strategies, for instance, which is an action that we suggest in the program, in the Interreg program. So in cases where the action or the output will not be reflected by the outputs and result indicators that we have selected, it is still okay to deliver these outputs. It just means that it will not be captured at the program level. However, we will still we'll try to find ways to understand the success of your output, which can be done through an evaluation exercise, for instance. But I would say that at the end of the day, the majority of the actions can be covered by the output and result indicators. I would say that's around 70–80% of the actions that you have in the IP are covered by the output and result indicators. There are a few exceptions, like strategies or platforms, but the majority, including policy recommendations, can find a correspondence in the outputs and result indicators.
Thank you, Nuno. Still remaining on outputs, we have two questions which goes a bit together. One is it mandatory to deliver outputs across all UPs? And another one is asking, is it required to deliver outputs in small-scale projects?
Yes, all projects, regardless of the typology, have to deliver tangible and realistic outputs. We do, in the case of small-scale projects, we do expect at least one output. In the case classic projects, we expect on average 3 outputs per project. It can be a little bit more or less depending on the activities that you want to conduct and let's say the usefulness of those activities to reach to implement the output you want to deliver. I believe I answered the question. So to sum up, yes, it is required to deliver. And again, I will highlight the fact that we expect tangible and realistic outputs. So we do encourage you to measure whether the output you want to deliver is realistic, considering the time frame that you have for classic and small-scale projects.
Thank you, Nuno. And we have now actually some question about pilot actions, and I will start with the very first one because it seems that there has been needed some main clarification, which is what do you mean as pilot action? So maybe a brief additional explanation regarding that would be nice.
Well, pilot actions, we do expect that pilot actions are jointly developed. That's the first point I would like to stress, in the sense that pilot actions need to be developed by 2 or more partners. And the purpose of the pilot actions is to test methodologies on the ground. So let's say that the first step before taking pilots to the ground is to develop a methodology that you will implement. The next step is obviously to test on the ground your methodology. Now, the results that you achieve by conducting these pilots in 1 or more territories will tell you how these pilots can be translated into recommendations, for instance. But before going to the recommendations, you can even make a second round of pilots, because in between you got an input from the observers who tell you to make some fine-tuning, to recalibrate your methodology, to reevaluate the methodology before you go into the ground and apply those pilot actions.
Thanks, Nuno. Still remaining on pilots, we have 2 questions which are very similar. And is it how many pilot sites are needed? What if we do not have any? And another participant was also asking, are pilots compulsory for all projects?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the work plan that I assume that you're talking about classic projects. It's not necessarily the case. As I said, we do expect that projects address 1 or more stages of the policy cycle. So if you remember correctly, the policy cycle in a very simplified way is divided in 3 stages. So it's up to you to tell us what is realistic from your point of view to develop within the time frame, whether you just want to address 1 cycle or the full policy cycle. Of course, if you address the full policy cycle, we will have a clear understanding from the moment you identify your challenge to the moment you deliver recommendations at the policy level, exactly because you got the chance to test those recommendations on the ground through pilot actions. And the next question, please remind me.
The next question is again about pilots, and yes. It's this one. So some of the actions mentioned in the IP do not lead to pilots or joint solutions. In case I deliver strategies or set up networks, how do I capture success?
Right. So this is a little bit what I explained already in relation to another question that was posed by one participant. So if you deliver strategies or networks, and of course these outputs are not covered by the cannot be seen as pilots or solutions. Here is not a problem because, as I said beforehand, we will conduct an evaluation to understand the success of these strategies, of these networks for the program. Again, the majority of the actions are covered by the output and result indicators. Of course, in some cases, like those you mentioned, the strategies, the networks, the platforms, in this case, we will conduct an evaluation afterwards. But nothing prevents you from, but don't, what I want to say is that you shouldn't feel reluctant from delivering a strategy or a network just because you will not find the appropriate output or result indicator.
Thank you, Nuno. If possible, still, I would just stay on this topic again. And there is one other question always regarding pilots, which is then linked to another question I see. So pilot action expected for small scale project, what will be considering the time that it's short? And another question, which was very similar, I don't find it now. It was always about small scale projects. So what we aim to have since what kind of actions we are expected since the time is really short. So they're like both kind of linked.
Right. So so you don't have, so in relation to the first question, you don't have necessarily to set up pilot actions in a small scale project. This is not really mandatory. Exactly because the way we see small scale projects is an opportunity, as I said, to bring newcomers who are eager to take part in the program, but also to reinforce synergies and complementarities. And how we are going to do it? Well, there's two main possibilities. So either you set up a capitalization action to make sure, not to make sure, but to roll out tools and solutions that for whatever reason you didn't have enough time to capitalize in another context, and here you find the opportunity to do so through a small scale project. That's one option. The second option is to let's say to set the scene with a project that is rather new to transnational cooperation. So the program provides the means to test waters, if I may say. And depending on the success of your small-scale project, you could then submit the results that you achieve to another funding, to another funding source. So to sum up, what we expect from small-scale projects is basically to offer you as an applicant the opportunity to capitalize actions or to develop projects that are rather new to transnational cooperation. So at the end of the day, you will be offered the opportunity to test test waters, if I may say, and based on the results that you achieve, then take those results and conduct a project in another with another funding source, or even with the ETC programs, depending on the topic.
Thank you, Nuno. I would just maybe now ask actually to you and Jana, if possible, we have basically 3-4 questions, which should be rather short still to answer. So if you want to, we can still keep those one. Otherwise, of course, we can reply to them through the FAQ, which will be published on the website. So you tell me what you prefer to do.
I am open to questions. That's why we are here for. So.
Yeah, I mean, if possible, I would also like to use this opportunity to go through all of them. So we have very practical one. One person is asking, what if the small scale project has more than one VP? And related to that, we had another question, is it possible to extend small scale project to 2 years? So basically 2 exceptional cases for small scale.
Well, you know, the small scale projects have a time limits. Of course, extensions can be, you know, can be granted by the program of course, in exceptional and well-justified cases. It doesn't mean necessarily that it can go up to 2 years, but we do believe that as I said, in exceptional and well-justified cases, small-scale projects can be extended. But you will learn more about project changes very soon in our program manual. The same applies, of course, to classic projects, in case they need to conduct activities beyond the duration they suggested in the application form. And the other question is?
The other question, we have another one about the application form. So unlike the previous cycle, it appears that we need to submit a draft work plan already in step 1. Is this correct?
Well, in step 1 for classic projects, you already have to provide this information. Is not, we don't expect an exhaustive description of your work plan, but you are expected to provide information in that regard in relation to the work plan. The same thing you would have to do with, of course, with the partnership or the description of your objectives. The difference between step 1 and step 2 is the fact that the level of detail that we expect in step 1 is not really the same as in step 2, but this will basically explain why you will be invited to submit the full application in step 2.
Thank you, Nuno. And if we really want to go to the very end, we have still 2 questions. One is regarding research. So how much research and on-farm experimentation is expected?
Well, we are open. I mean, if this, I assume that this applies to both classic and small-scale projects. Well, transnational programs don't have the same focus as research-oriented projects that do applied research, for instance. So here you also have to consider that your partnership is not just composed by universities or research centers. You have a diversified group of people with different backgrounds that come from different sectors, from different geographies. So we do expect a mix of partners from research, from public administration, from private sector. But at this moment, we cannot really say that we expect that our expectations when it comes to pure research or applied research. I mean, of course, projects can do applied research, but they have to consider that the results have to be applied on the ground, that the recommendations should be taken to the policy level, and make sure that these results will be durable and transferable to other contexts in the program area and beyond. In relation to the second part of the question, in terms of farm experimentation, well, this could be a topic of a small-scale project. But then it pretty much depends how far the topic is aligned with the program priorities and its specific objectives, and whether or not this is relevant in the context of this program. We should also not forget that the small-scale projects will work as a benchmark for the next calls. This is a new, as I said, this is a new approach to cooperation. We are very much eager to learn from you the projects that you would like to set up within this typology. And of course, here I don't think it would be fair to exclude farm experimentation.
Thank you, Nuno. Regarding the very last question, unless you have anything to add, I guess we already answered to that when you were already talking about small scale. We had the time to actually go through that quite some times. So unless you stop me, Nuno, I would give the word to Jana for some conclusions at this point.
Yeah, please, Jana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And now we just would like to remind you with some last reminders and information to not forget about the most important thing is the deadline of submission of your proposal. The deadline for submission of the first step for classic projects is 28th of February at 3 p.m. while the first cut-off date for submitting the small-scale project is the 22nd of April at 1 p.m. So as normally we do, the submissions are done by the electronic monitoring system. For the new program, these will be called GEMS. The GEMS will be available in a few weeks now. So at the moment, there is not available yet. That's why on our website you can see only a template, a printed template of the application form. It will be also organized from our site on the 10th of February, another session with questions and explanation how the GEMS it's working. Therefore, I invite you to participate also on this upcoming session. Just to mention that the calls for projects and proposals are open every 12 to 18 months, so you should keep checking our website with all the information regarding the opening of calls on our session for project applicants. Another reminder on this point, I would like, since I saw some questions we didn't answer today regarding eligibility rules, next week on the 26th of January, there will be another Q&A session dedicated entirely to eligibility rules, where my colleague will explain in more in details and answer to your questions related. And for the end of this Q&A session, we prepare some questions for you to choose some multiple choice questions.
Yes, indeed. We do have a little test to check if you were listening well enough, or if we were good enough to explain you things. So it can be seen in both ways. And we have a first question. What is the minimum number of partners in a classic project? So 2, 4, or 7? And let's see if you dare to answer and what will the answer be at this point. It's good to see that no one says 2. Let's wait just a few seconds here. Still some doubts I can see. I see the names of those that voted 2 and will contact them personally. Okay, so I will just close this one now. Yes, I have the feeling that who wanted to vote it did it already. So 7, 72%, 74. God for the 7. Almost 80 now. Okay, with the time is increasing, I see. Any comments, Jana, Nuno? You want to go ahead, of course? Okay, so we can close this call.
I think it's quite fine. Good. Good listeners.
Super. Second question, what is the role of the observer and what is a good quality network observer? So they enrich the partnership with expertise in the chosen field and or promote the project results among target groups. They may test project outputs or implement them at the end of the project, or they support the uptake of results at policy level. Let's see what the answers are here. See if someone is still voting. The first one was easier because more people voted and quicker also. Nuno, any comments?
No, not really.
The correct answer is all of them. So you didn't fail in this question, so bravo.
Exactly. Even though one actually got most of the votes, but
indeed.
Now the other probably will increase a bit. Super. And now we go to the very last one, which is where you can get information on projects that have been funded in the past. So on keep.eu, Cordis, Europa.eu, or interregeurope.eu. And here again, everybody's voting keep. Keep.eu remains the most voted one. Any last final comment, Jan or Nuno?
Yes, indeed. You can find most of the old projects, all of them on the keep.eu. Of course, you can visit and welcome to check also the website of the Interreg Europe.eu, where you can find other the policy platform and other interesting tools they developed. On the Cordis websites, unfortunately, they still have only the Horizon 2020 and FP7 project database. So it may be for another proposal useful.
Exactly. And I will also remind you that for the Interreg Europe platform, we had the presentation also during our kickoff. So if you scroll through our, you browse through our records of the past event, of course, you can find information also there. Jana, I leave you the closing words.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for this slide of questions for a recap. I would like to thank you, all the participants of today's first question and answer session. This session was recorded, that's why it's going to be also published and you can rewatch it. If you have any doubts related, it's going to be on our website, where you can also find all the procedure and questions in our part of the frequent asked questions. And I would like to remind you that next week on the 26th of January is going to be our second Q&A session regarding the eligibility. So therefore, I invite you to participate. And until then, I wish you a very nice week and weekend. See you. Bye.